In the chill of winter, a little girl stood in traffic, cradling her sick baby sister. "Please, save her. She can't breathe," she begged, as the crowds rushed past. As hope began to fade, one lonely man finally stopped. What he did next would change their fate forever. The morning came in sharp and colorless, the kind of winter cold that didn't just bite your skin, it slipped under it. Frost clung to the sidewalks. Exhaust hung low in the air. Traffic lights blinked against a sky that hadn't decided whether it wanted to snow or simply stay cruel. Graham Whitaker moved through it untouched. His black sedan idled at the front of the line, heater humming, dashboard clock glowing 8:12 a.m. He adjusted his cuff out of habit, navy wool coat buttoned to the throat, jaw set in the calm, disciplined expression that had built an empire. Widowed 3 years. No children now, no softness left for accidents of fate. His phone lit up on the console. Mara. Boardroom in 18 minutes. Partners already seated. He didn't answer. He never needed to. He was always early. The light stayed red longer than usual, or maybe he simply noticed it longer. That's when he saw her, a small figure in the median between lanes, too small for the world she was standing in. 7 years old, maybe, brown hair escaping a loose-knit cap, thin jacket zipped crooked. In one arm she held a cardboard candy box. In the other, a bundled baby whose face was flushed an alarming shade of red. She moved from car to car with careful urgency, knocking lightly on windows that didn't roll down. "Just $1, she mouthed once, barely audible through glass and traffic. Some drivers stared straight ahead. One shook his head. Another gestured for her to move away. The girl didn't argue. She just stepped back and tried the next car. The baby in her arms let out a weak, wet cough. Something about the sound carried. Graham told himself it was none of his business. Cities were full of things that weren't his business. The light turned green. Cars surged forward. The girl stepped back toward the center line, and her boot slid. It happened fast. Black ice doesn't warn you. It simply removes the ground. The cardboard candy box flew from her hands, skidding across the asphalt. Wrapped chocolates scattered over the frozen sheen like fragments of something fragile. The baby's head tipped back. The girl's knees buckled. Brakes screamed. Graham didn't remember opening his door. Cold hit him like a slap as he ran into traffic, his polished shoes slipping in slush. A horn blared. Someone cursed. He reached her just before she fell fully backward, catching her shoulder with one hand and steadying the baby with the other. His coat brushed the dirty snow. For a split second, everything stilled. The baby's breathing wasn't right. It came in thin, uneven pulls. A pause, then another shallow breath that fogged the air in a broken burst. The girl looked up at him, with eyes too large for her face. "Save her!" Her voice cracked, scraped raw by cold and fear. "She can't breathe." The words didn't feel dramatic. They felt factual. Graham shifted the baby against his chest, instinct overriding analysis. He'd held a child once before, years ago, in a hospital room that still lived somewhere behind his ribs. His hands had trembled then, too. "Hey," he said firmly, voice dropping into the tone that moved boardrooms and closed negotiations. "Look at me. We're getting help. Right now." The girl didn't look convinced. She looked desperate. Her small hand clamped around his sleeve as if testing whether he was solid. Traffic edged around them. Drivers stared. No one got out. Graham scooped the baby closer, feeling heat radiate through thin fabric. Too hot. Fever hot. He guided the girl toward the curb. "What's her name?" he asked. "Lisa." The answer came instantly. "She's 9 months." "And you?" he asked, more quietly, softening his voice. "What do I call you?" She hesitated for half a heartbeat, as if the answer might not matter to a man like him. Then she lifted her chin just a little. "Ellie," she said. "My name's Ellie." The baby's breath hitched again. A soft wheeze caught in her throat. Graham's phone buzzed sharply in his coat pocket. Mara again. "Boardroom in 15 minutes. We're starting." He ignored it. He crouched slightly so he was level with the girl. Up close, he could see how red her hands were, bare fingers swollen from cold. Her boots were cracked at the seams. The candy lay scattered behind them, bright wrappers against black ice. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The girl hesitated. Just a flicker, too quick to trust. "They're busy." Another cough from Lisa. Weaker this time. Graham didn't wait for the rest. "Come on," he said, already moving. "My car's right there." The girl stumbled beside him, refusing to let go of his sleeve. She kept looking down at the baby's face, lips moving silently as if counting breaths. He opened the passenger door and slid into the driver's seat, pulling the baby carefully into the back seat while motioning the girl inside. The heater roared as soon as the doors shut, warm air flooding the frozen silence. Up close, the baby's breathing sounded wrong, wet, strained. The girl climbed into the back beside her, immediately rubbing the baby's tiny feet between her own hands. "Stay with me," she whispered to the infant. "Stay with me, okay?" The words weren't childish. They were practiced. Graham started the engine fully and pulled away from the curb. His phone rang again. Mara's name flashed bright and insistent. He glanced at the clock. 8:17 a.m. 18 minutes ago, this morning had been predictable. Now a baby was fighting for air in his back seat. The girl leaned forward between the seats, eyes wide and shining. "Please," she said again, softer now, as if afraid volume might scare him off. "Save her." Graham tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He had built a life around control, around choosing which fires to step into and which to walk past. This wasn't a calculated move. It wasn't strategic. It was immediate. In the rear-view mirror, he saw Lisa's chest pause, just long enough to send a pulse of ice through him. And for the first time in years, Graham Whitaker felt something stronger than obligation. He felt urgency. He pressed the accelerator. Behind him, on the frozen median, the candy wrappers lay scattered across black ice, small, bright pieces of a morning that would never go back to normal. In the back seat, Ellie's fingers twisted deeper into his coat, as if she knew something he didn't. As if she understood that once a man stops at an intersection like this, he doesn't leave unchanged. The baby's breath stuttered again, and Graham drove faster. The heater roared like a living thing, blasting warm air into the frozen silence of the SUV. Within seconds, the windshield began to fog at the edges, the cold outside pressing faint white patterns against the glass. Inside, it was a different world. Graham adjusted the vents toward the back seat without turning around. "Keep rubbing her hands," he said, voice steady. "Not too hard, just enough to keep the blood moving." Ellie nodded as if she had been waiting for instructions all morning. Her fingers were raw and swollen, the knuckles split in places, but she cupped Lisa's tiny feet inside her palms and breathed warm air over them. "It's okay," she whispered to the baby. "It's okay. We're in a warm car now." Lisa's breathing came in fragile pulls. a thin wheeze at the end of each inhale, then a pause that lasted just a second too long. Graham checked the rearview mirror. The baby's face was flushed deep crimson against the pale blanket. Sweat clung to the fine hair at her temples. Fever. He unwrapped the wool scarf from his own neck and reached back without looking. "Here," he said. "Wrap her tighter." Ellie obeyed immediately. She handled the scarf carefully, like something expensive she didn't deserve to touch. "Thank you," she murmured, almost formal. Graham's phone vibrated again. Mara. He let it ring once, twice, 3 times. The road ahead split, downtown to the left, hospital district to the right. His turn signal clicked automatically toward the left. Reflex, habit, a lifetime of not missing what mattered. Lisa coughed. The sound was weak and wet. It turned into a tiny gasp. Ellie leaned forward suddenly between the seats. Her voice cracked open. "Mr. Please?" Just that. No argument, no manipulation, just a child who had already run out of options. Graham turned the wheel hard to the right. The signal blinked uselessly for a second before he shut it off. His phone rang again. This time he answered, tapping the screen with one finger while keeping his eyes on the road. "Mara!" Relief flooded her voice immediately. "Graham, they're in the boardroom. If you don't show up in the next 10 minutes, we risk losing." "I'm not coming." Silence. On the other end of the line, the hum of conference room chatter bled faintly through. "I'm sorry," Mara said carefully. "I'm not coming," he repeated, calm and even. "You're never not coming." Her statement wasn't emotional. It was factual. He was the man who showed up, the man who closed the deal, the man who didn't let personal things interfere. He glanced into the rearview mirror again. Ellie was counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3, waiting for the next breath. "Today I am," Graham said quietly. He ended the call before she could answer. The hospital rose ahead in pale concrete and glass, winter light reflecting off its surface like something sterile and indifferent. He pulled into the emergency drop-off lane too fast. The tires hissed against wet pavement. Before the car had fully stopped, he was already out, circling to the back door. He opened it and reached for Lisa. Ellie hesitated for half a second before letting him take the baby. That half-second mattered. Trust doesn't come easy to children who have been handling crises alone. "Come on," he said, already moving toward the sliding glass doors. "Stay with me?" Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A nurse at the triage desk looked up just as Graham stepped forward. "She's burning up," he said firmly. "Difficulty breathing. 9 months old." The nurse didn't waste time. She signaled to a tech, and within seconds Lisa was transferred onto a small rolling stretcher. Ellie's face drained of color. "Wait!" She lunged forward instinctively, nearly tripping over her own boots. Graham caught her elbow before she fell. "You can't go back there yet," the nurse said gently. "We'll take care of her." Ellie stared as the stretcher disappeared through double doors. Her body swayed. Graham felt the shift before he saw it. He crouched and steadied her shoulders. "Hey," he said. "Look at me." But she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the hallway where her sister had vanished. Her voice came out smaller than before. "Mom, she wouldn't wake up." The words didn't make sense at first. "What?" he asked quietly. "This morning." Ellie's lips trembled, but she fought it down. "I tried to wake her. She didn't move. I thought maybe if I got medicine for Lisa first, Mom would wake up after." The logic was painfully simple, terribly brave. Graham felt something shift inside his chest. "Where is she?" he asked. Ellie swallowed. "Home." The nurse behind the desk was already typing quickly into a computer. "What's your mom's name, sweetheart?" "Rachel," Ellie answered automatically. "Rachel Turner." The nurse paused. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She looked up slowly. "Are you sure?" she asked. Ellie nodded. The nurse's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. "She was brought in early this morning," the nurse said carefully. "Unconscious. Paramedics found her." Ellie blinked. "What?" Graham straightened slightly. "What do you mean?" "She's in ICU." The words landed like a weight dropped from above. For a moment, Ellie simply stared. The information didn't fit anywhere. It floated. "Is she awake now?" she asked. The nurse hesitated. "No." Ellie's small body went very still. Graham recognized that kind of stillness. It wasn't calm. It was shock. When the world tilts and you don't yet know which way is down. A hospital volunteer approached with a clipboard. "We'll need Guardian information." "Guardian?" Graham opened his mouth, then closed it again. What was he? A man who happened to stop at a red light. A stranger with a warm car. Nothing more. Ellie turned toward him suddenly, eyes wide. "They're not going to take Lisa somewhere else, right?" she asked. Her fingers reached for his coat again without thinking. Graham looked down at her hand, gripping the dark wool fabric. "No," he said, though he had no authority to promise that yet. "They're not taking her anywhere." A woman in a navy blazer approached from the hallway. Calm posture. Clipboard tucked against her side. Eyes observant but not unkind. "I'm Dana Klein," she said. "I'm the social worker on call." Her gaze moved from Ellie to Graham. "And you are?" The question wasn't accusatory. It was procedural, but it cut clean. Graham felt the weight of it. Who are you to these children? He could answer honestly. No one, or he could answer with something else. "I'm the one who brought them here," he said steadily. "And I'm not leaving." Dana studied him for a moment, measuring tone, body language, the girl's proximity. Ellie stood slightly behind him now, half hidden by his coat. Dana nodded once. "We'll need to talk." From somewhere beyond the double doors, a faint monitor alarm sounded. Ellie flinched. Graham placed a steady hand at her back. He didn't know what would happen next. He only knew one thing with certainty. He had stepped into the intersection, and there was no turning back. The ICU hallway felt colder than the winter outside, not in temperature, but in sound. Machines hummed in controlled rhythms. Shoes squeaked softly against polished floors. Voices stayed low, careful, as if anything louder might shatter something fragile. Ellie walked beside Graham without speaking, her hand still twisted in the side seam of his coat. Every few steps she glanced up at him, not for permission, but to confirm he was still there. Lisa had been taken to pediatrics, fever stabilized for now, oxygen assisting her small, stubborn lungs. Rachel Turner was 3 floors up. Dana led them through secured doors and into a smaller waiting area near intensive care. The chairs were gray, the lighting too bright. A coffee machine blinked uselessly in the corner. "She was brought in around 6 a.m., Dana explained quietly. "Neighbor called 911 after hearing a fall. Severe infection. Sepsis." The word landed heavy. Sepsis. Graham felt it in his spine. A hospital room years ago flickered in his mind. White sheets, monitors, the slow unraveling of a life he hadn't been able to negotiate back into existence. He had stood in that room powerless, a man accustomed to control, watching numbers fall beyond reach. The old numbness tried to slide into place now, that familiar internal closing of doors. Then Ellie's fingers tightened. He looked down. She wasn't watching the hallway. She was watching him, not as a CEO, not as a rescuer, as something steadier. "Is sepsis bad?" she asked. Dana's eyes softened. "It's serious." Ellie absorbed that. "Is she alone?" she asked next. The question wasn't about medical statistics. It was about fear. Dana hesitated. "She's sedated." Ellie swallowed. "I don't want her to be scared." Graham felt something shift again, less like urgency this time, more like recognition. He had once stood beside a hospital bed wishing the person inside could hear him, wishing someone would promise they weren't alone. "Can she see her?" he asked. Dana studied him. "Briefly, from the doorway. But we need to discuss guardianship first." The word settled heavily. "Guardian." Graham straightened slightly. "What needs to happen?" Dana glanced at Ellie, then back to him. "We need to determine who has legal authority over these children. Without a parent who is conscious and without documentation, placement decisions move quickly." Ellie heard one word clearly: placement. Her face went pale. "Like somewhere else?" she whispered. Dana crouched to her level. "It's just a possibility. We have to make sure children are safe." "I keep her safe," Ellie said immediately, voice rising. "I do. I always do." Graham knelt beside her before she could spiral further. "You shouldn't have to," he said gently. Ellie looked at him sharply, as if that idea had never occurred to her. "Before we continue, there are moments in a hospital where the world narrows to details." Property bag labeled Turner Rachel sat on a nearby counter. Inside it, a worn leather purse, the strap cracked from years of use. A pharmacy bottle with 3 remaining pills. An envelope stamped "Final Notice" folded into tight quarters, creased and reopened too many times. No speech was needed. Rachel Turner had been fighting something long before infection reached her bloodstream. Dana followed his gaze. Single mother, no listed emergency contact, no documented father. When the paramedics brought her in, a neighbor mentioned she had a brother, Dana added. We pulled his name from an old employment record and flagged him to be notified. Graham felt Ellie lean closer to him without realizing she had. She works nights, Ellie offered quietly, as if defending her mother from an accusation that hadn't been made. She was just tired. Donna's expression didn't change, but something in her posture did, less clinical, more human. I understand, she said. A nurse stepped through the ICU doors. Rachel Turner? Dana rose. We're here. You can look in for a moment, the nurse said. Just briefly. Ellie's grip on Graham tightened to the point of pain. He didn't pull away. The room was dimmer inside. Rachel lay motionless beneath hospital sheets, tubes threading carefully around her body. Monitors blinked in green and white. Oxygen flowed in soft mechanical sighs. She looked smaller than Ellie. Children often think parents are indestructible. Hospital beds reveal otherwise. Ellie stepped forward until her fingers brushed the edge of the doorframe. Mom? She whispered. There was no response, only the steady, artificial rhythm of machines. Graham stayed half a step behind her, not crowding, not retreating. Ellie took one cautious step inside, despite the nurse's gesture to remain near the threshold. "Mom!" she tried again, louder now. "Lisa's at the doctor. She's gonna be okay. I sold candy like you said. I was careful." Her voice cracked at the end. The nurse gently touched her shoulder. "Sweetheart." Ellie looked back once, at Graham, not asking permission, asking whether this was real. He gave the smallest nod. Rachel didn't move. After a long moment, Ellie stepped back out into the hallway. The door shut with a soft click. Dana cleared her throat. "We need to talk about next steps." Ellie's eyes darted between them. "Am I in trouble?" she asked suddenly. The question hung there, raw and honest. "No," Graham answered immediately. "You're not in trouble." She searched his face for signs of performance, for cracks. There were none. Dana gestured toward the waiting chairs. "Let's sit." Graham remained standing. "What are the options?" he asked. Dana spoke carefully. "If Rachel remains unconscious and no legal guardian is identified, temporary placement will be initiated. Foster care or kinship placement, that just means living, with relatives like your Uncle Tom, if their home is safe enough." Ellie's breathing quickened at the phrase foster care. "Are they going to take Lisa away from me?" she demanded. Dana didn't answer directly. Graham did. "No." He didn't look at Dana when he said it. He looked at Ellie. Dana noticed. "Mr. Whitaker," she said quietly, reading the name from the registration file. "You understand the implications of what you're implying?" He did. Temporary placement meant paperwork. Home assessments, background checks, court dates. It meant stepping beyond a single morning. His phone vibrated again in his pocket. He didn't check it. "I understand," he said. Dana folded her arms loosely. "Then I need to ask you something very directly." She met his eyes. "Who are you to these children?" There it was again, the clean cut of it. Graham glanced down at Ellie, at the stubborn set of her jaw, the exhaustion behind it, the quiet terror she was working so hard not to show. He could say no one. He could step back into his life, into glass boardrooms and controlled outcomes. Or he could choose something that would not be temporary. "I'm the person who brought them here," he said slowly, "and I'm not leaving them." Ellie didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped half an inch. Sometimes that's how trust begins, not with celebration, with relief. From down the hallway, a machine alarm sounded briefly before stabilizing. Ellie flinched again, but this time she didn't let go of his coat. And Graham understood something with unsettling clarity. He hadn't just intervened at an intersection, he had walked into a story that was going to ask more of him than money. And for the first time in years, he didn't immediately look for the exit. Hospitals have a way of making time feel elastic. Minutes stretch thin, hours collapse. The clock on the wall above the ICU waiting area read 11:42 a.m., but it could have been midnight or early dawn. The light never changed, the air never softened. Ellie sat at the edge of a gray plastic chair, feet not quite touching the floor. Lisa's small knit hat rested in her lap, the one she had pulled off in the car. She smoothed it over and over, pressing invisible wrinkles flat. Across the hall, a vending machine hummed. Two visitors argued quietly about parking validation. A man in a suit laughed into his phone before catching himself and lowering his voice. Life continued in polite fragments. Ellie stared at the ICU doors as if willing them to open. Graham stood near the window, phone in his hand, but untouched. Messages stacked on his screen, missed calls, urgent emails, subject lines marked critical. The deal he had spent 6 months building now balanced on his absence. He slid the phone back into his pocket. There were different kinds of crises. A nurse passed through the doors and gave Dana a subtle nod. No change. Not better. Not worse. Ellie's breathing hitched with every movement in that hallway. After a while, she slid off the chair without a word and disappeared down the corridor toward the stairwell. Graham noticed immediately. He waited 3 seconds, then followed. The stairwell was colder than the main hall. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting that flickered faintly overhead, the echo of distant footsteps traveling through hollow space. Ellie stood on the landing between floors, back pressed against the wall, facing the metal railing. Her shoulders were shaking, but not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. She was trying not to make noise. Graham stopped a few feet away. She didn't see him at first. Her hands were clenched in the sleeves of her jacket. She wiped at her cheeks with the heel of her palm, quick and efficient, as if tears were a mechanical inconvenience. "If I'm good," she whispered to herself, "if I'm quiet, they won't take her." The words didn't sound like a child inventing fear. They sounded like someone who had learned rules the hard way. Graham stepped forward slowly and lowered himself onto the step beneath her. Not towering, not commanding, just there. "You don't have to earn being kept," he said softly. Ellie startled, then turned toward him. Her face was blotchy from cold and crying. Her eyes searched his expression for judgment. "Sometimes," she said carefully, as if testing the idea, "if you're not good, they send you somewhere else." Graham felt the truth of that statement like a bruise. "Who told you that?" he asked. She shrugged. "Nobody. It just happens." A long silence settled between them. In the distance, a door opened and shut. "I tried," she said suddenly. The words rushed out before she could stop them. "I tried to wake Mom. I shook her. I said her name. I even made coffee like she does." Her chin trembled. "I sold candy so Lisa could get medicine. Mom said sometimes people help more when you smile." The memory of the black ice flashed in his mind, bright wrappers scattered like confetti over frozen asphalt. "We didn't eat yesterday," Ellie added, quieter now. "But Lisa had some cereal. I saved it." Graham's throat tightened. He remembered boardrooms where men argued over profit margins that would have covered this family's rent for years. He remembered signing checks without blinking. He remembered standing beside a hospital bed years ago, wishing money could buy time. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. Ellie looked confused. For what? For the part of the world that didn't notice sooner. She studied him carefully, as if weighing whether adults were allowed to admit that. "Are they going to split us?" she asked again. The question always came back to that. Graham answered steadily, "No." "You don't know that." "No," he agreed. "But I know this. I won't let it happen without a fight." Ellie blinked. The word fight didn't scare her. It steadied her. Upstairs, the elevator doors chimed faintly. Footsteps approached. Dana appeared at the top of the stairs, pausing when she saw them. "Dr. Patel would like to speak with you," she said gently. They stood together. Back in the hallway, the fluorescent lights felt harsher than before. Dr. Patel was waiting near the ICU entrance, hands folded in front of him. His face carried the careful neutrality of someone who has delivered difficult news before. Rachel's condition is critical, he began. The infection has affected multiple systems. We're doing everything we can. Ellie gripped the hem of Graham's coat again. Is she going to wake up? She asked. Dr. Patel didn't lie. We don't know yet. That answer was worse than no. Ellie nodded as if she understood medical uncertainty, though her eyes were glassy. Donna placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. We need to prepare for different possibilities, Dana said carefully. Ellie's body stiffened. Different how? Graham could feel the shift in the air. Dr. Patel lowered his voice. If Rachel doesn't regain consciousness, decisions will need to be made regarding long-term care for both children. Long-term care, not just today, not just this hallway. Ellie's fingers curled tighter. Lisa needs me, she said firmly. I know, Dana replied, and we will consider that. The words consider and placement floated again like threats wrapped in polite language. Graham stepped slightly forward. What would it take, he asked evenly, for them to remain together? Dana met his eyes. A stable guardian willing to undergo emergency evaluation and temporary placement procedures. The hallway went quiet around them. Ellie looked up at him slowly. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her silence asked the question. Graham inhaled carefully. 3 years ago, he had stood in another hospital hallway and walked away from everything that made him vulnerable. He had buried himself in numbers and contracts and schedules because those things behaved predictably. This was not predictable. This was human. I'll start the process, he said. Dana studied him again, searching for impulsiveness, for ego, for savior instinct. She found none of those. She found steadiness. Then we begin paperwork immediately, she said. Ellie didn't fully understand what paperwork meant, but she understood tone, and for the first time since the intersection, her breathing slowed. Somewhere behind the ICU doors, a monitor beeped steadily. Not better, not worse, just holding. And in the stairwell below, where a child had whispered a prayer to be good enough to stay, something shifted, not in the hospital, not in the machines, but in a man who had once believed his life was finished with second chances. He had stepped into the cold that morning. Now he was choosing to stay in it. Hearing a child say she must earn love is devastating. As I watched her, I couldn't help but wonder how many of us are carrying that exact same ache right now. Have you ever felt invisible when you needed help the most? Share your thoughts. Hospitals teach children to whisper. By late afternoon, Ellie had stopped asking every 5 minutes whether she could see her mother again. She sat in the pediatric unit beside Lisa's crib, one hand resting gently on the rail, as if proximity alone could anchor the baby to the world. Lisa's fever had lowered slightly, oxygen tubing curved beneath her small nose. Her breathing was still uneven, but less frantic now, less like something slipping away. Graham stood near the window of the room, jacket draped over the back of a chair. His shirt sleeves were rolled once at the cuffs, an unconscious break from the armor he wore in boardrooms. He had never spent this many hours in a hospital without pacing. Now he simply stayed. A nurse entered quietly with a small paper cup. "For her," she said, nodding toward Ellie. "Hot chocolate." Ellie looked at it like it might vanish if she blinked. "For me?" she asked. "Yes." She wrapped both hands around the cup and inhaled the steam before taking a careful sip. "Thank you," she whispered. Graham stepped into the hallway when his phone vibrated again. Mara, this time, didn't sound urgent. She sounded cautious. "The board is not happy," she said. "They think you've lost perspective." "Perspective?" Graham repeated. They're asking whether this is sustainable. He glanced back through the glass panel into the room. Ellie was humming softly to Lisa now, a tune without words. "I'll handle the board," he said. "This isn't just about how it looks to people," Mara added carefully. "It's about legal risk and responsibility. If you're considering involvement beyond today—" "I am." Silence. "Then you'll need legal counsel," she said finally, "and documentation." "I'm already arranging it." He ended the call. When he turned back toward the pediatric room, he nearly collided with a man standing at the end of the hall. Late 30s, worn denim jacket, faint smell of cigarette smoke clinging to fabric. His posture carried defensiveness before a word was spoken. "You Graham Whitaker?" the man asked, tone sharp. Graham's expression didn't change. "Yes." "I'm Tom Turner." The last name landed with quiet force. Rachel's brother. Tom glanced past him into the room. His eyes lingered on Ellie, then on the medical equipment. "They called me," Tom said. "Said my sister's in ICU." "She is," Graham replied evenly. Tom exhaled hard through his nose. "And you are?" "The person who brought the girls here." Tom's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I heard about that." His gaze hardened. "You think money makes you family?" Graham held his ground. "Family shows up before the crisis is bleeding." The words were measured, not explosive, not cruel, simply factual. Tom bristled. "You don't know what you're talking about." "No," Graham agreed calmly. "I don't. But I know a 7-year-old was selling candy in the middle of traffic this morning." Tom's face flushed. Ellie had noticed them now. She stepped into the doorway, hot chocolate forgotten in her hand. "Uncle Tom?" she asked hesitantly. Tom's expression softened slightly when he looked at her, but it was a brief shift, more obligation than warmth. "Hey, kid," he muttered. She didn't move toward him. She stayed where she was. Dana appeared from the ICU corridor at that moment, taking in the tension instantly. "Mr. Turner," she said politely. "We'll need to speak." Tom's posture straightened. "I'm her next of kin." "Yes," Dana replied evenly. "And that means we'll assess your suitability for temporary guardianship." Tom blinked. "Suitability?" "It's standard procedure," she said. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You're kidding." Graham watched Ellie's shoulders inch upward toward her ears. Tom glanced back toward him. "You think you're just going to swoop in?" "I'm not swooping," Graham said quietly. "I'm staying." Tom stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't know what you're getting into. Government checks, benefits, all that. You think this is a charity case?" The words hung ugly in the hallway. Ellie's eyes dropped to the floor. Graham didn't raise his voice. "That's not why I'm here." Tom scoffed. "Sure," Dana interjected smoothly. "Mr. Turner, I'll need to review your housing situation, employment, and any prior records." Tom stiffened. "You don't get to—" "I do," Dana said gently but firmly. "It's about the children." The word children carried more weight than any argument. Tom's anger shifted into something more calculating. "I can take them," he said. "They're family." Ellie's fingers found the edge of Graham's sleeve again without her looking up. Graham didn't respond immediately. He simply placed his hand lightly over hers. Cheryl. Stanton arrived 30 minutes later. Efficient, composed, eyes that missed very little. Mara had moved quickly. Cheryl listened without interruption as Dana summarized the situation. When she finally spoke, her tone was calm, precise. If Mr. Turner intends to seek placement, we document everything. Stability, history, home environment. No hero moves, she added, glancing briefly at Graham. We do this correctly. Tom crossed his arms. You brought a lawyer? Graham met his stare evenly. Yes. The hallway felt smaller. Inside the pediatric room, Lisa stirred weakly, oxygen monitor beeping in soft rhythm, and then a sharp alarm from upstairs, not the steady beep of maintenance. An urgent, rising tone. Every adult in the hallway froze. Dana's head snapped toward the ICU doors. Dr. Patel emerged seconds later, moving fast. Ellie's breath caught. "Is it Mom?" she asked. No one answered immediately. Graham felt her grip tighten, stronger than a child's hand. Should be. Nurses hurried past them. Tom went pale. The alarm cut off abruptly. Silence fell like a curtain. Dr. Patel approached slowly this time. His expression said enough before he opened his mouth. Ellie didn't ask again. She already knew something had shifted. Without thinking, she stepped closer to Graham, not hiding, not seeking rescue, seeking steadiness. And he gave it. He didn't know what the next words would be. He only knew that whatever they were, he was no longer standing at the edge of this story. He was inside it, and there was no stepping back out. The alarm stopped. That was the cruelest part. It didn't end in chaos. It ended in quiet. Dr. Patel stood in front of them, hands loosely clasped, shoulders slightly lowered, the posture of someone about to carry weight into a room that cannot hold it. "I'm very sorry," he said. The words were practiced, but not empty. "We did everything we could." For a second, Ellie didn't react. Her eyes stayed fixed on the doctor's face, as if she were waiting for the second sentence. The correction, the exception. There wasn't one. Rachel Turner was gone. Tom swore under his breath. Not loud, not dramatic, just a small, sharp sound that dissolved quickly. Dana stepped forward instinctively, but Ellie didn't move toward her. She didn't move at all. Her body went very still. Graham felt the shift in her grip before he saw her expression change. The small hand on his sleeve didn't clutch anymore. It pressed flat, like she was testing whether he was still solid. "I tried," she whispered. No tears yet. "I really tried." The hallway seemed to tilt. Graham crouched in front of her so she didn't have to look up. His voice came out steady, though something inside him was unraveling. "This wasn't yours to fix," he said gently. Ellie shook her head once. "I made coffee." I shook her shoulder. "I told her Lisa needed medicine." Her breath wavered. "She didn't wake up." The words cracked open the dam. Not loudly, not with screaming, just a quiet collapse. Ellie folded forward into his coat as if gravity had finally claimed her. Her forehead pressed against his chest. Her small body trembled, not violently, just enough to feel. Graham wrapped one arm around her without hesitation. He had once stood beside another hospital bed and felt helpless in a way that hollowed him out. He had walked away from that loss with walls so high nothing could scale them. Now a 7-year-old was crying into his coat, and he felt something different. Not helplessness. Responsibility. Dr. Patel continued speaking softly to Dana and Tom about next steps, documentation, personal effects. The words moved around them like background noise. Tom ran a hand through his hair. His anger had drained into something less certain. "She was fine last week," he muttered. "Just tired." Dana's voice remained measured. Infections escalate quickly. Ellie lifted her head slowly. "Can I see her?" she asked. The question carried no hysteria, just need. Dr. Patel nodded gently. "For a moment." They walked back toward the ICU doors. This time the room felt different. The machines were still, the monitors dark, tubes removed with careful dignity. Rachel lay beneath the sheets as if sleeping, but the air in the room no longer carried urgency. Ellie stepped forward alone. "Mom," she said softly. She didn't ask her to wake up. She didn't promise to be good. She simply reached out and touched her mother's hand. It was cool. Ellie inhaled sharply, but did not pull away. "I'll keep Lisa warm," she said in a small, determined voice. "I promise." Graham stood near the doorway, giving space, but staying close enough to catch her if she faltered. After a long moment, Ellie turned back toward him, not asking what comes next, asking who will. Back in the hallway, Dana spoke quietly. "We'll need to initiate emergency guardianship proceedings." Tom straightened slightly at that. "I'm her brother. That makes me next." "Yes," Dana replied, "but suitability assessments still apply." Tom's jaw tightened. Graham remained silent for a moment, watching Ellie stare at the floor tiles as if memorizing them. Then he spoke. "Ellie and Lisa stay together." Dana looked at him carefully. "That's the priority," she said, "but it requires a stable guardian willing to assume full responsibility." Tom scoffed faintly. "You don't even know them." Graham's voice stayed level. "I know enough." Tom stepped closer, frustration flaring again. "You think this is some redemption story? You get to feel good and walk away?" Graham didn't rise to it. "I'm not walking away." The hallway went quiet again. Dana glanced between them. "Mr. Whitaker," she said evenly, "if you're serious, this is not temporary charity. This is legal commitment, background checks, home study, court oversight, parenting classes if required. Every step." "I understand." "And if the board pressures you?" she pressed. "I'll handle it." Tom laughed once, bitter. "You don't know what you're signing up for." Graham looked at him steadily. "I do." He turned slightly so his body shielded Ellie from the exchange, not aggressively, just instinctively. Tom noticed. Something unreadable crossed his face. Cheryl stepped forward, professional and calm. "We can file for emergency temporary guardianship today," she said. "Given the circumstances and the children's attachment, the court will consider immediate placement pending full evaluation." Dana nodded. "I'll document current observations." Ellie looked up at Graham. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," he said carefully, kneeling to her level, "you don't have to pack a bag tonight." Her lips parted slightly. "And Lisa?" she whispered. "She stays with you." A single tear slid down her cheek this time. Not the quiet collapse from before. Something different. Relief mixed with grief. Cheryl handed Graham a stack of preliminary forms. "Read carefully," she said. He did. Name, address, employment, declaration of intent to assume temporary guardianship of 2 minors. The pen felt heavier than any contract he had ever signed. His hand trembled once, briefly, before steadying, because this time the numbers weren't abstract. They were human. He signed. Across the hallway, Tom watched with folded arms. He opened his mouth once, as if to argue, then stopped. Maybe he saw something in Graham's posture, or in Ellie's quiet dependence. Or maybe he simply recognized that this wasn't about pride anymore. Dana took the papers. "We'll move quickly," she said. Ellie reached for Graham's coat again, not out of panic this time, out of certainty. In the distance, a hospital cart rolled past. The ordinary rhythm of life resumed. But for Ellie, the world had shifted permanently. She had entered the hospital with a mother. She was leaving with a promise. And for Graham, this was the moment everything changed. He had once believed loss closed doors forever. Now, in the sterile hallway where grief still lingered in the air, he realized something unexpected. Sometimes loss doesn't end a life. Sometimes it hands you someone else's and asks whether you will stay. He didn't hesitate. Winter did not loosen its grip overnight. It thinned. Snow receded in uneven patches along the sidewalks. The air no longer cut quite as sharply, but it still carried a chill that reminded you how recently everything had been frozen. 3 weeks after Rachel's funeral, Graham walked back into his office building wearing the same navy coat he had worn the morning at the intersection. Only this time, his phone stayed in his pocket. The boardroom was quiet when he entered. 12 seats, floor-to-ceiling windows, a skyline built on ambition. "You missed a deal," the board chair said without greeting. Graham took his seat at the head of the table. "I saved a life." A pause. "That's not your job." Graham met his gaze evenly. "It is now." Silence settled. Not agreement, but recalibration. They could argue about quarterly projections later. What mattered in that room had shifted. The man at the head of the table was no longer insulated by detachment. He had chosen something that did not fit on a spreadsheet, and he was not apologizing for it. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Ellie sat beside Graham on a wooden bench outside the family courtroom, swinging her legs nervously. She wore a pale blue sweater Dana had brought and a pair of dark jeans that finally fit properly. Lisa slept in a carrier at Graham's feet, cheeks rounder now, fever gone. Cheryl reviewed a thin folder in her lap. "Tom has submitted a request for kinship placement," she said quietly, "but we've documented inconsistencies, employment gaps, housing instability, prior charges for disorderly conduct." Graham nodded. "Dana's assessment?" he asked. "Clear," Cheryl replied. "The girls remain together in your temporary care, pending adoption proceedings. The judge will weigh stability and demonstrated commitment." Ellie looked up. "Is Uncle Tom mad?" she asked. Graham didn't lie. "He's frustrated." "Because he doesn't get money?" The question was innocent, but precise. Cheryl met Graham's eyes briefly. "Because this isn't about money," Graham said calmly. "It's about who shows up." Ellie considered that. Inside the courtroom, the hearing was brief but deliberate. Dana testified first. She spoke about attachment, about routine, about how Ellie had stopped flinching at hallway noises in Graham's home, about Lisa's improved weight and medical follow-ups. Tom stood when asked. He tried to sound indignant. "They're my blood." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Blood does not override safety," she said evenly. Cheryl presented documentation. Photos of Graham's home inspection, background checks, character references, evidence of consistent presence, hospital records, school enrollment, pediatric appointments. No theatrics, just proof. Tom's bluster thinned as the facts settled into place. The judge's ruling was firm. "Temporary guardianship remains with Mr. Whitaker. Further review scheduled for adoption petition." Tom exhaled sharply, but said nothing. Outside the courtroom, Ellie stepped closer to Graham without thinking. "Does that mean we're staying?" she asked. "Yes," he said. She didn't smile widely. She simply nodded once, absorbing it like oxygen. Adoption day came in early spring. It hadn't happened overnight. There had been months of home visits, forms that seemed to multiply on his kitchen table, background checks, and quiet evenings where Graham wondered if the system would really trust a man who had spent so long living behind glass. Not cinematic, no swelling music, just paperwork, signatures, a small American flag in the corner of the clerk's desk. Mara attended quietly. Cheryl smiled. Dana watched with something like relief. Ellie sat very still while Graham signed the final document. When the clerk stamped it, the sound echoed louder than expected, permanent. Outside the courthouse, the air carried a softer edge. Graham crouched in front of Ellie before they walked toward the car. He held something in his hands, a pair of small knit gloves, pale gray, lined with fleece. He slid them gently onto her hands, one at a time, adjusting each finger carefully. "Better?" he asked. Ellie looked down at her hands, no longer red and cracked from cold, no longer bare in the middle of traffic. "Warm," she said softly. The word carried more meaning than temperature. Lisa babbled from the stroller, tugging at the edge of her blanket. Ellie reached down and adjusted it instinctively, but this time without tension, without urgency. They drove to the cemetery in quiet. The sky was overcast but not hostile. Grass had begun pushing up through thawed soil. Rachel's headstone was simple, her name etched cleanly into stone. Ellie stepped forward first. She held something in her hand, a single candy wrapper, folded carefully into a small square. She knelt and placed it gently at the base of the stone, like a retirement, like a closing. Graham set a small bouquet beside it. "I don't know if you can hear us," he said quietly, "but they're safe." He didn't make grand promises. He made one simple vow. "I won't let the world miss them again." Ellie moved closer and leaned into his side, not gripping, not clinging, belonging. They stood that way for a long moment. Wind moved lightly through the trees. After a while, Ellie looked up at him. Her voice was softer now, less frightened, still cautious. "Do I have to sell candy anymore?" Graham knelt so they were eye level. "No," he said gently. "Your job now is to be 7. Her mouth trembled slightly, this time not from cold. "Okay," she whispered. Lisa let out a small laugh behind them, wobbling on unsteady legs as she reached toward Graham's pant leg. He lifted her easily. The baby pressed her warm cheek against his shoulder. No fever, no broken breaths, just steady life. They walked away from the grave together, 3 shadows stretching across damp grass. Not rescued, not repaired, but chosen. And in a world that had once stepped over them at an intersection of black ice, they were no longer invisible. They were a family. And that's where this story gently ends. Even though all characters and events are fictional, this story was created for entertainment, to inspire hope, compassion, and the kind of quiet strength that restores faith in humanity. Did this story move something in you? A memory, a truth, a small act that meant everything? I'd love to hear it. Drop a comment below. Thanks for sharing this time with me. I'm Flint, wishing you warmth, peace, and the quiet strength to keep believing. I'll be here with another story real soon. Take care, friend.